Hi, this is Dan Collymore, and you're listening to the V2 podcast.
Hello and welcome to the 72 show.
Hello and welcome to the V2 Football Podcast. I'm Shane Lees, your host, and joining me this week we've got Dan Tracy.
Evening.
We've got Nick Davey.
Yeah, good evening.
And we've got Anthony Kendrick. How you all doing?
All good, thanks.
Yeah, good.
Hello.
Good.
There we go. Okay, we're going to get straight into it, and this week there's a big topic, and this is I'm going to try and hold my tongue for as long as I possibly can, but this is one that has really irritated me.
I wonder what's first on the list here.
Yeah, and I think me and Anthony had a little bit of a debate before about this, but Josep Bartomeu, I can't actually know how to pronounce that, the Barcelona chairman, has said he wants European wildcards, so the big teams in Europe get a almost guarantee free pass into the Champions League. Now that picked up a little bit in the later week, where there was talk about a European Super League, and the major Premier League clubs met up to talk about the European Super League. This idea of the big clubs in Europe break away from the Champions League and have their own league where they are guaranteed a spot every single year. So I want to ask you guys, and I'm going to try and not say anything for as long as I can, what do you think of this?
I'll go first then. I think it's a terrible idea. Firstly, the wild cards. I think if you take away footballing merit, it almost sort of kills off football, really, doesn't it? I mean, you can't just have a closed shop. I know you have it in some sort of American sports, but their whole sort of structure, the sport itself is completely different to football. So I don't think you can sort of pull the ladder up and say, right, we'll have a nucleus of 16, 20 teams and that'll be it. I just think, no, not for me.
To play devil's advocate, the MLS, for instance, has no promotion and relegation. It's you buy into the league and then you're in.
That league's still in its infancy, though, isn't it? It's still sort of only, 15, 20 years old. That again, it hasn't really got the structures in place, so it's still a work in progress of sort of American soccer. But I think not just English football, but just football as we know it as a whole, it's got so much heritage. I don't think we can sort of say, right, well that'll do. Like we'll just cut off the sort of lifeblood of how sort of football's run from day to day. I don't think that's a good idea.
All right, to say with the promotion relegation thing, as an argument, you could say that a team such as, say, QPR, if they knew they were going to be in the Premier League every year, they can then calculate their future incomings, etc., and it would help them out. Like, it may help teams financially to be able to predict their future, earnings, etc. And, you see a lot of teams in the Football League getting into trouble. Look at Bolton, look at the financial fair play. There's several other teams in trouble.
I won't disagree with that, but I will say that clubs like Man United and Barcelona and PSG don't really have too many financial concerns. There's no threat of them going bust, and that's what we're talking about. It's the big clubs.
Sorry, I was talking about the promotion and relegation thing. On that, though, I do think it's important in the Champions League. I think from a perspective of being a fan watching it, you want to see the big teams play in the Champions League, and it is important. I think that they're there.
But surely the big teams are only the big teams of their time. Because if we go back further enough, wouldn't we say Leeds are a big team, Aston Villa are a big team, Nottingham Forest are a big team? Deportivo are a massive team.
Wow.
Well, they were. They had a long stretch of almost 10, 20 years of winning. Exactly.
Everything sort of changes, isn't it? But that's why you need
big teams. Big teams become
otherwise
middling teams. Middling teams become big teams. It all switches over. So how can you say at a fixed point in time, these are the big teams, I want to see them playing each other each year? Because they could still decline, even if they have guaranteed European football, they could have decline, and they wouldn't be the best teams, and the best teams wouldn't be in the competition.
It wouldn't necessarily be the same wild cards every year, but there are teams with bigger fan bases and other teams. Look at a team like AC Milan, for instance. They've not been in the Champions League for a while, and I don't think you could argue, based on the fans and all that, they're not a big team. I think other big teams, I think it's important that they are involved. I understand the arguments against it for footballing reasons, of course, but I do think there is another argument that the big teams have to play in the Champions League, because at the end of the day, that's what's on TV, that's what's sells, and that's what people want to see.
Is it all financially motivated?
Of course it is.
Yeah, of course it is.
So why should you be rewarding...
Can I give you an example? Let me take Leicester City, for instance. Leicester City will presumably get in the Champions League next season. Do you think a foreign fan, say a Spanish fan or a German fan, would rather see Leicester or, say, Liverpool?
They'd probably rather see Liverpool.
Exactly. And that is...
But here's the ultimate counter, and it's the point Dan made before, and for me, this is the main argument. Liverpool didn't earn that spot. Leicester did.
No, they didn't. Of course they didn't. But
and ultimately, sport, not just football, sport, no matter whether it's the Olympics or whether or not it's rugby, sport, the central thing behind every single sport is competition.
Yes.
And if you take away the right to earn and win, things like titles and trophies, and that would be what would happen. You'd be taking them away and saying you can't win European trophies. You're not a big enough club. You've got rid of competition, and it's not a sport anymore. It's purely a business.
The thing with the wildcards is it'd be a couple of wildcards. Say, four wildcards a season or something like that.
Yeah, but right now, at the moment, it looks more likely that if anything does happen, it will be the European Super League idea. Which would be essentially a closed competition between whoever decides they're the biggest teams.
Absolute shocking idea.
I can't agree with the European Super League, but I can kind of see the wildcards idea coming off.
Well, yeah.
With wildcards, though, it's almost rewarding sort of failure, isn't it? It's like, well, why should Liverpool finish 8th in the league, get a spot in the Champions League? Why should AC Milan, 8th in Serie A, get the same? They're not.
Yeah, if they haven't earned it.
They're only big clubs in stature, but they keep finishing outside their sort of league sort of places that you'd originally think of Champions League positions, and you think, well, how long can they be a big club for?
The big teams are the ones who achieve the most and who have the best players. And if they do not achieve and do not have the best players, then they aren't going to finish high in the league. Therefore, they have not earned a right to be in those positions. You can say what you want about Leicester being a big team. They've earned their right so far. They've been one of the best teams in the league this season. They've had some of the best players in the league this season, regardless of whether or not they're big names. So it changes year by year. And so to, at any point, nail down and say, you are a big team, you are in this, you're just saying at the time, you're good. Because otherwise, why wouldn't we include the likes of Nottingham Forest, Champions League winners in the past, in this wildcards? Have a championship side suddenly in the Champions League. It would be mad. It would be absolutely insane. So why would you go ahead and say, a side that's finishing 10th place in Serie A, that's fine? It's just such a random scale, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Shane.
It is, but today I don't think Forest have anywhere near as big a fan base as a team like Liverpool is. The thing is football's there, it's for the fans and it's for entertainment. And
exactly, it's for the fans, and the fans are all of the fans.
Sorry?
The fans, you're right, it's about the fans, and the fans are all of the fans, not the fans of not the glory hunters, not the select few who just so happen to have supported a big club.
No, but
it's everyone.
As a neutral fan, in a foreign fan, England's such a small place, I think as a neutral, I'd be more interested in watching, say, Liverpool against Real Madrid than I would Leicester against Real Madrid, for instance.
Yeah, no, and I completely get that point, but I'll put it this way, one of the best games I've ever seen was Newcastle v Arsenal. And Newcastle, they may have been a fairly big club at one point, but they're not a big club these days. Draw? Yeah, the 4-4 draw. It's one of the best games I've ever seen.
When Shaq scored.
Yeah, as a neutral, watching those games, it's going to depend on how the game goes. In terms of watching the most entertaining game, yes, you want to see the biggest players, but the biggest players are not consistently going to be at the same clubs. I just think, no matter which way you go about it, Wildcards European Super League, there's going to be a cut-off for this essentially elite clubs who have the most money, the most income, saying we want more. It's all about them getting the most money. It's not a surprise the timing of this. You look at the Spanish TV deal. They've just had it told to them that you're going to have to start sharing your money out. And the big clubs in Spain are not liking that. Apparently this is not being led by the Premier League, but it's being led mostly by other teams in the continent. Arsenal have already turned around and said, we don't want this. So you're also seeing a managerial flight to the Premier League where the best managers are coming to the Premier League. It's so much about the big clubs afraid they're not going to get their lion's share. They're worried about the money in the Premier League. They're worried about not getting their money anymore, rather than any sporting consideration. And for me, I think if you genuinely support this idea, 100% you think this is a great idea, you are literally a traitor to football. Because this is sport. This is sport. This is what it is. It's competition. Things change. You have your good years. You have your bad years. You've got to get used to it. It's not going to be good times over a while. You have to get used to it. If your club goes through a bad patch, tough shit. You just so happen to pick a team that doesn't do well. Look at Villa. Villa fans over the years, they've had some great times, and now they're having absolutely tragic times. It's just how it goes. That's what sport is, good times and bad times. And if you take away the bad times for the sake of money, you're ruining sport. That's my view.
Make one final point. There was a meeting this week of all the some of the big Premier League chairmen. I also think there's the effect of China as well, and the Chinese market, which could be a serious threat to the major European leagues. You know, the amount of money they're spending on players, that could be another big factor.
I definitely agree that there is a bit of a worry about China. The one thing I will say about China is people aren't really looking long term. It's mainly dependent on how long the current Chinese president stays in charge, and also the fact they financially cannot sustain this for so much time, because the big Chinese billionaires who are investing in this will eventually want to see some returns, and when they don't, they will pull out. I think that's a short-term thing more than anything. It's a bit like being worried about the Qatari leagues. But okay.
Also, with the European Super League, I think there's a couple of caveats to that, because I think you've got to think of the Premier League money. I don't think each clubs are ready to walk away from that just yet, with it being so much of an increase in the summer. Also, if you took all the, say these major European clubs, let's say 20 for the sake of argument, and each of these teams are all used to winning their respective leagues, say PSG or Juventus, for example, they're not going to all of a sudden want to be bottom of the league, are they? Because then that sort of tarnishes their image almost. It sort of goes against what they want to be as a big club. So you don't want to necessarily be 16th out of the best 16, because then you're not a winner anymore. So I think...
then the scale changes even more, because suddenly you're like, why is this a big team? Why should they be here? They're finishing bottom for this league every year. The one thing I will say is the European Super League wouldn't be a breakaway from the Premier League, so you wouldn't see the top four leave the Premier League. What you would see is them leave the Champions League. So the European Super League would replace the Champions League as European competition.
But would then UEFA sanction that? So then what would happen if those teams left for the European Super League? Would they then be allowed to play in the Premier League? There's too many sort of ifs and buts, isn't there? There's
a lot of stuff around it. Personally, I don't think this will happen.
No, I think it's just sort of posturing, really, isn't it? I think it's more sort of...
It is a lot more realistic than it was, say, 10 years ago. And I think it was about 10 years ago Arsene Wenger turned around and said, this could happen. So I think it is a more realistic possibility. But
it could always happen, though. That's the thing. There'll always be someone with big enough pockets to try and make it happen. Whether it can get off the ground because the loopholes that would have to be made and the leap of faith for clubs to leave their respective leagues, that's a different story. But it always rears its head every sort of 2-3 years, because the way the UEFA competitions are run, they can only be changed every 3 seasons. So we're sort of locked into the format until 2018, and then it can be open for debate and change. So it's always that sort of elephant in the room of European Super Leagues, and it's sort of, it's always a hot topic at some point. But again, I think it's just sort of posturing from Premier League clubs and just sort of testing the water. But we'll have to wait and see, won't we?
Hello, this is Bianca Westwood from Gillette Soccer Saturday on Sky Sports, and you are listening to the V2 Football Podcast.